Good morning, everybody, and happy Aloha Friday. And we were talking off camera a moment ago that some of us are a little blurry. If I look blurry like I'm wearing an Hawaiian shirt, that is not the camera, that is me. I am wearing an Hawaiian shirt, as a few of you are. We like to celebrate Aloha Friday every Friday. It's Casual Friday in Hawaii. So welcome to our virtual meeting. I also like to always mention whatever the national day is, but today is a bit of a national day of remembrance, of course, for those who lost their lives on 9/11. So a bit more solemn occasion, certainly. It's called Patriot Day and a National Day of Service and Remembrance for those who lost their lives on 9/11. And if you have any family or friends from 19 years ago that you lost, our condolences are with you. But we will move forward with our PSG of Mercer County group. PSG of Mercer County, the professional service group of Mercer County, is here for you, anybody that is in any kind of career transition. And our main goal, our main purpose, besides to have a little bit of fun, is to make sure that we can provide to you the opportunity, the tools, the resources, a little bit extra stuff for yourself to make your own job search more efficient and effective. We do meet each Friday here at 10 o'clock. We have a topical presenter. We've got a great presenter in Jeff Altman. I will introduce him in just a moment. But before we do, I want to let you know, especially if you're joining us new for the first time today, we do have a LinkedIn group. Our LinkedIn group is a terrific resource for anyone in career transition. And our group now has over 1,600 members, 1,600 members strong. They are all people that have been through our program or attended our meetings at least once. And that's our only requirement for joining our LinkedIn group. So if you're joining us for the first time today, you can go put in a request to join our group. PSG of Mercer County is the group. And I will check to see if you've ever been to one of our online virtual meetings or if you've been to one of our in-person meetings that we were able to hold until mid-March. If we haven't met before and I can't find your name, I'll probably send you a LinkedIn email, or you can send me an email at psgofmercercounty@gmail.com, psgofmercercounty@gmail.com, and say, hey, David, I attended the program with Jeff and I'd like to join the LinkedIn group, and you are in. Members contribute articles and job leads and all sorts of things. We all get those. If you read an interesting article, you may want to post it for everyone's benefit. Maybe you've got a terrific job lead from a very reliable recruiter, except it has nothing to do with what you do. We all get those too. You may copy and paste that into the group as well, because someone else may benefit from it. And that activity, you being active in LinkedIn, even just a copy and paste of an article or job lead, does allow LinkedIn to know that you're active and you're a contributor in LinkedIn, and helps improve your rankings and coming up a little bit higher. There are other things that go into it, but that contributes. So, and also, if you are looking for a connection to a company or an industry and you don't have anyone as a first-degree connection, you can connect to anybody in our group. So no matter how big or small your personal first-degree LinkedIn connections are, it can be increased by up to 1,600 members. So please join our LinkedIn group. We do also have a website, and our website, like everything we do, is branded to PSG of Mercer County. Our website is psgofmercercounty.org, all one word. It's not just a landing page and event calendar. We have over 120 pages of resources for job seekers. And so what we do have is pages we call job search pages, and there's a menu item right at the top. And when you click on that, you don't see any jobs. We don't post any jobs in our job search pages or job posting pages. But what we do is we post links to over 2,600 company career pages, and we pre-sorted them for you. So our service area, well, virtually, I guess, is the whole country or the whole world, but is Mercer County and the surrounding area. So we've built our job search pages for companies that have a presence or offices in Mercer County or the 6 border counties. And so when you open up the job search page, the first thing you'll do is you'll see a choice of those 7 counties, Mercer and the 6 border counties. And by the way, if you come from overseas in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, then of course we do have a link there because you are a border. Our border is the Delaware River, but we've included that as well. And then once in those job search pages for the county, we have up to 12 categories. And so you'll see a category like not-for-profit or financial services or education, healthcare, the 12 different categories. And when you click there, there's a list of companies. And when you click on those companies links, they'll go right to their career page. And keeping that 2,600 plus company set of pages up to date, it's kind of like painting a bridge. Once you start on one side and you go all the way and paint the bridge, you go back and start over. So Bill Pagula on our team, he is painting a bridge, or essentially he's going through each job board's page, making sure that the companies haven't moved the link or moved their career page to keep it as current as possible. So thanks so much to Bill for doing that. So those are some of our resources. If you have a landing or other job search celebration that you want to let us know about, you could put that in chat. In the upper right corner of your screen are some icons. One is a little kind of cartoon call out icon. And if you click on that, chat will open. And if you want to let us know of a landing, I'll look for it a little later and let all of us know later in the meeting. So you might just put landing and then what it is. The reason why you would put the word landing, people are putting so much other information in there for connecting and sharing, which is terrific. But at least if I see the word landing, it'll hopefully pop out and I'll be able to see it right away. So let's just quickly go over the ground rules as we get ourselves started, and then we will get ourselves started. So once again, do please keep yourself on mute. And Jeff will facilitate questions and answers. You can put them in the chat. If Jeff, I don't know the details of his presentation. If he has a call out, says just open it up, well, that'll be up to him. But we typically use chat for Q&A. And so if you have a question for Jeff on any of his points, what you do is in chat, type the word question and then type your question. And the reason why is, again, it allows Jeff and I to be able to see the question pop out at us rather than try and read through all the comments and figure out which are just sharing comments and which are questions. So help us see them a little faster. And so I will be monitoring the chat. I'm sure Jeff will be peeking too. Jeff's program today is very interactive. It is without a slide deck. That's his style. So that's why I suggest you may want to click the button at top. It may right now say view everyone. It may say who's talking or active cameras. If you put it on who's talking, you'll see a much larger, and we've learned, blurry image of, well, whoever is talking, which I guess if you've set that, the blurry image who's talking now. But I will do my best to keep quiet during Jeff's presentation. And also do keep, so like I said, keep your microphones on mute, just so that we don't have any accidental background noise. You're welcome to keep your video on or off during the program. Probably if you're going to ask any questions, keep it on if you can, but it's your choice. And also at the end of the meeting, once we wrap up, we're going to keep the session open. We usually do so for about 30 or 40 minutes for just some open networking, no topic of any specific setting, but if you have something you want to talk about, you're welcome to. A bunch of us will hang around. Jeff, you're welcome to as well. So I think we're raring to go, and that's really exciting. Oops, we got a couple of callers that I just have to quickly mute. Just give me 1 second. And there you go. So callers, I know it's a little harder with using the phone, keypad controls to do muting. Okay, so it is just my great pleasure to welcome to PSG of Mercer County, Jeff Altman. Jeff, also known as the Big Game Hunter, is a job search coach and interview coach, and he's a former executive recruiter. Jeff is the host of No BS Job Search Advice Radio. It's the #1 podcast on Apple Podcasts for job search with more than 1,900 episodes. And it's on Job Search TV on YouTube, Amazon, and Roku. It's also available for Apple TV and 90+ smart sets through bingenetworks.tv, bingenetworks.tv. So you easily find Jeff almost anywhere online. So PSG of Mercer County is very pleased to welcome the Big Game Hunter, Jeff Altman.
Thank you. And the slide at the end has a list of free resources I make available. The Amazon show that I have, Roku, and the others, it's a paid service. Again, later on, when you see the slide or receive the slide, those will be the free resources available to you. Now, interviewing is my topic for today. And as someone who worked in search for many years, I have seen some great interviewers, great interviewees. I've seen some people who are kind of mediocre, which is really where most of the flow is. And as I started to talk to my clients about what worked for them and what didn't, I start to learn how firms evaluate and assess and the mistakes they make on their side. So I start to develop a framework for interviewing that just makes a lot of sense, and it's really easy to follow along with. Now, I choose not to use a slide deck because, frankly, you're going to focus on the slides rather than what I say. And I want you to pay attention because there are nuances along the way that I think are far more important than the data of the individual tactic. So my goal here is to get across a framework for interviewing for you that's easy to execute on, comes with a couple of basic assumptions to it, and you'll be able to deliver and as a result stand out from the people that you compete with. So that's my target for today. And if you have any questions, you know how to do it in the chat, okay? Now, let me start off with one assumption. And the assumption is that if you've seen a job description, at best it's 80% accurate. And I say that because if you think about how most of them are generated, a day like today, someone walks into their manager's office and says, "Hi, I'm giving notice." And thus the manager calls over to HR at 4 o'clock, maybe, and says, "You got that job description we used to hire David? Yeah, he just gave notice. I need to hire a replacement. So could you get it out to our resources and see who can get onto my calendar for Tuesday or Wednesday of next week?" No one ever takes the time to update these things. And if you're like most people, you've been in situations before where you've gone on interviews and you've wondered, why was I invited in for this job? It doesn't fit the job description anyway. How did this all happen? And thus, I want to make sure that you're aiming at the right target. Because when you think about the framework for most interviews, you're kind of like on a conveyor belt being moved along. They say, "Tell me about yourself." And you do. And you go back and forth for a little while before they start looking for clarification about your experience and going into more detail until they eventually say, "So, do you have any questions for us?" And you say, "Tell me about the job." And they do that. You say, "Sounds great. Terrific. We'll get back to you." And that's, part of being a sausage on a conveyor belt. You're being moved along, but unfortunately, they have the power in this scenario because they know what they're aiming for in specific, and you've got a fuzzy answer. So I'm not going to deal with some of the cosmetics right now. I'm just going to focus on the framework. And to me, the cosmetics are the run up to the interview for the research, the last 15 minutes before, things along those lines, as well as the thank you note afterwards. If we have time later, I'll go into some of those, but I'm just going to deal with the concrete of the interview itself. So let's work with the assumption now that you're getting a call out of the blue from Ronnie or Rona Recruiter, who's calling you up to recruit you for a job. And invariably, they start off by saying, "Is this David?" "Yeah." "Hey, my name is Rona Recruiter, and is this a good time to talk?" At which point you first have a decision to make as to whether or not it is a good time for you to talk. And what makes it a good time is that you're mentally prepared to have the interview. If you aren't, just very simply say, "I've got some people around me right now. Would it be possible if I could get back to you at," and then you just schedule another conversation with them. One of the worst things I used to experience time and again is the accommodating job applicant who just doesn't perform because they're just not ready. So make that decision quickly rather than immediately jumping in to be accommodating and then not performing at your best. If you can deliver, by all means, continue the conversation. And this is the way I'd like you to start it off. Thanks so much for making time to reach out to me. And if you've seen a job description, you reference it. If you've been referred by a recruiter, you reference them. And from there you go. I recall the position description, but I want to get your take on the role. Could you tell me about the job as you see it and what I can do to help? Now, what this does is a couple of different things. The most important thing is you're getting information about the job at the beginning of the interview. So you can talk about what you've done that matters to them and not just talk about what you've done, which is completely different. Remember, they're not looking for you to talk about everything known to humanity. They're looking for whether or not you can do the job that they have available. And since you only have a job description or you've seen an ad, and even if you've been referred by someone, it's not always accurate information. I want to make sure that you hear about the role at the beginning so you can start connecting the dots for them in the interview. Now, every once in a while, you get a hiring manager who says something along the lines of, I'll get to that later. I don't know if any of you have ever done that to someone before. It's certainly possible. And to me, what happens is you've learned something about them. You've learned something about the environment just from that remark, because most people are very accommodating. They want to tell you about the job because they're excited about it, or they have a need and they want to make sure that you can do it. So why not tell you? But every once in a while, you have someone who doesn't. Maybe they're rushed. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I want to make sure that you hear about the job at the beginning rather than waiting to the end when it's too late to do anything with that information. Follow that? At the end of the interview, when you ask the question about tell me about the job, it's too late. They've already made a decision in their mind. They're not going to change their mind based upon the magic that you say to them then. The idea is everything has to demonstrate how you fit the need. And I just want to make sure you hear about it at the beginning. That's point number one. Ask about the role. And you can't just say, tell me about the job. It's too blunt and too abrupt. It doesn't show you well. But if you ask it in my way, which I'm going to say once again, hey, thanks so much for making time to reach out to me. I recall the position description, or David told me about the role, if he's the referring recruiter or employee of the organization, but I want to get your take on it. Could you tell me about the job as you see it and what I can do to help? And if this is a LinkedIn reach out that someone's done, very simply, all you say is, that they introduce themselves, you just go into the question. Thanks so much for reaching out to me. Tell me about the role that you're recruiting for and what I can do to help. I want to make sure you hear about it at the beginning. Now, from there, you surrender, the mantle to them and let them start the interview. And they're going to ask you something like, tell me about yourself and what you've been doing professionally, or walk me through your background. There's some open-ended question that's designed to have you talk for a little bit, right? So the way to answer that for most of you has always been, well, I've been doing this for such and such period of time. Most recently, I've been doing this and that. And you kind of talk for as long as you feel comfortable before you start running out of oxygen. And unfortunately, most answers that I used to experience when I was doing recruiting were too long. We live in a culture where we've got pretty short attention spans. And as a result, we have to be concise. I believe that most interview answers should be no more than a minute to a minute 15. If that sounds ridiculously short to you, take your phone out now. Just time a minute and see how much I talk during a minute, and then a minute 15. And you'll discover it's a lot longer than you think it is. Even so, with that tell me about yourself question, I want you to start off in that same kind of a way for about 20 to 25 seconds. I've been in the field now for however long it's been. Most recently, I've been working for so-and-so, or I've been consulting to so-and-so, or I've been doing this and that and this and that. Before that, I worked for a number of different organizations doing such and such. Now, this is the next key point. I want you to use a bridge phrase that People tell me they have a Scooby-Doo moment that they observe. And if you know the cartoon Scooby-Doo, it's the big dog with the perky ears who at moments goes, "Ugh?" And that's what we're going for. And you'll say to them, but what's probably most relevant to my background for this role is my experience with fill in the blank. And you start connecting the dots for them with what your background is that relates to what they just told you about that they were looking for. See, again, most people talk about their experience and they're not connecting the dots. And what hiring managers used to tell me is that they kind of listen to interviews kind of the way they look at resumes. They make snap decisions based upon recency. And when they look at a resume, the more current the experience is, the more they're interested, right? But on interviews, people start doing these long soliloquies that they don't want to listen to. And thus, if you connect the dots for them at the beginning, it gives them the idea that this is important work for you. It's more relevant work for you that relates to what they're looking for. And thus you're able to move ahead a lot faster in their thinking. Because kind of like that resume, it's designed to make them know, I'm looking for this. Hey, she's got this too. And they kind of get excited by it. And thus they start to dive in deeper. Now you'll notice, I'm not going to teach you how to be better at what you do. That's for you to prep for. You have to be ready to talk about the things that are even as far down in your resume as page 3 on the bottom. Because there are those managers who will ask those questions arbitrarily, even though they don't really care. They're people who like to just trip someone up along the way. Or they're curious about something. So just review what's on your resume so you're prepared to talk about it. And thus, as they start to segue into the next part of the interview, which is around behavioral interview questions, I want you to be prepared in advance to with a couple of stories that you can work on based upon your understanding of the job description. But most of them will, most of you will be able to think on the fly and be able to adapt your stories to the specific things they told you at the beginning. Remember, everything is about connecting the dots for the hiring manager, for the recruiter, for everyone involved in the process, so it's easy for them. When you make it hard, you're just hurting yourself. Make it easy. No one has time. No one is in a situation that's designed to make them work. It doesn't benefit you to make them work to pull things out. Now, I see a question from Mike. Is it a good idea to submit a comparison of skills had versus required with your resume submission? I tend to think of that in the context of a cover letter. Now, the resume should be, a pretty good depiction of what your background is that relates to the role. So again, they don't have to work to find it because not everyone's going to read the cover letter. And with cover letters, if you're submitting it as part of an email, it should be the body of the email rather than a separate attachment. No one pops open the separate attachment. Like if one says resume.doc and the other one says cover letter.doc, they go right to the resume. If you're submitting it through an applicant tracking system that's designed to only accept one document, I love doing the cover letter as page 1. And it's kind of like, I forget what the term has been developed for. I want to say T-letter is the framework. It's funny, I did this years before T-letters were ever coined, but it's the idea of if you're submitting it through a system and making it page 1, it gives the ATS or LinkedIn the perception that all the keywords are at the top of page 1, and thus more recency. So again, flush left is the skill sought, flush right is how long and how recently. And thus you're, shall we say, suggesting to the applicant tracking system, suggesting to LinkedIn, who by the way is going to be using has already begun to use a lot more analytics to make it difficult to just stuff a resume. So you want to, if you're submitting it to an automated system, make it page one if it can only be a one-page document. So I hope that answers your question, Mike. So back to the part about the interview. I think in terms of the next part is they're going to start to get to the behavioral questions that I want you to be prepared for at the beginning. Now, there are a variety of different formats for answering questions, and not knowing the seniority of everyone on the call, I'm going to deal with the three formats I coach to. Amazon, and my belief, less experienced people should always stick with STAR: situation or task, action, result. Because people can always copy the task when you're less experienced, right? So I want to ensure that someone can define what it is that they did well. I was assigned the project by my manager to do such and such, and thus we had to get it done by such and such period of time. I'll skip ahead to action and then result. What I did is the action. The result is, you're the hero of the story. This is kind of like all those TV shows that all get summed up in the next 30 minutes. And you want to be the hero where everyone lives happily ever after. And the happily ever after, in addition to delivering everything on time or ahead of schedule, you want to lay out money saved, money earned, or a percentage improvement over the previous situation. So that this way they have a sense of impact. For those of you at manager level and above, when you're defining the situation, give people a sense of the size of the thing you were working on, because after all, there's a difference between $20,000 and $2 million and $20 million and $200 million and $2 billion. And for some organizations, they want to see the B number. For some organizations, they want to see the 100M number. Just be aware to give them a sense of size and scope, as well as numbers of people where that's relevant. There's a difference between managing 2 people and 222 people. So lay it out for them so they don't have to work to extract it from you. And work that into your story, which again, a minute to a minute 15. I know it sounds short, but you're giving them an outline. That's all you're doing. Giving them an outline so they can probe to where they want to without you, excuse my description of it, vomiting all over them, as so many people do. They won't listen to it. That's always the hard thing for job hunters to hear. They won't listen if you give them all the information. They will be distracted and start thinking about their next meeting, how they can end the interview, when lunch is, and what time I'm going to meet my wife, husband, or partner. Just be aware. You have to contain yourself a little bit and entertain. There is a theater to doing these stories. I refer to it always as the theater of interviewing. It's not a regurgitation of facts. What it is a form of entertainment to keep the audience interested. So, and again, I hope you haven't heard me lie or encourage you to lie in any way. I don't believe in that. I believe in being accurate with what you tell them so that it's easy for them to see the fit or not see the fit. But it's the best presentation about yourself and your abilities related to the role. Going into an interview, have 3 stories prepared in advance that relate to what you're interviewing for or what you understand the interview to be about, so that in this way, you don't have to figure it out on the fly. And I'll point out to you that it's important to practice the stories, the opening question, and your answer to tell me about yourself in advance. See, most job hunters go on interviews, and the first time the words ever come out of their mouth are at the interview. They kind of feel like, I can wing it. I've done this before. I've done this for 20 years now, 30 years, even longer. But how many interviews have you gotten turned down on based upon winging it? Every great athlete in the world practices. Every entertainer rehearses. And job hunters go out on an interview, and the first time the words ever come out of their mouth are at the interview. And they wonder why they don't perform. So practice a little bit. Practice with your wife, husband, or partner. Hire a coach. Alex is on the call. He's excellent. You can hire Alex to help you. You hire me, whomever. Just spend the time to practice so that this way you make your mistakes in advance of the interview. You can feel some of your nervousness and dumb mistakes, stupidity, self-criticism in advance of the interview. I know I was working with someone yesterday who's in the entertainment field on the West Coast, and we're practicing a couple of these points. And the first time she said them, it all came out very stiff. And the second time, there was a 15% improvement approximately. But by the third time, when I reminded her, don't act like you're on an interview. Pretend like you're talking to your brother or sister or your husband. And she told me it was an ex-husband. Pretend you're talking to your brother or sister who you're close to about what you do. Just have that conversation. She got to 90% of potential there easily because she relaxed. And she'd done it a couple of times and made a few mistakes. Again, you're a performer. You're an entertainer. Your job is to deliver your lines effectively. And part of that involves rehearsal. Now, invariably, they're going to get to the point where they say, so do you have any questions for us? And typically, that's where you would say, so tell me about the job. But they did that, so you can't go to that. What you can do is ask a question that clarifies something. For example, when they described the position, they mentioned there would be an emphasis on one thing. But in the course of their questioning, you noticed it was slightly different. They kind of zeroed in on one part of your background. You can ask your clarifying question at that point and make that the first one that you pose so you get it out of the way and it's no longer a disturbance in your mind. So I noticed when you described the position, you described it as being this, but I noticed there were a lot of questions about, I'm going to pull something. It was initially a manager's job. I'm noticing a lot of coding questions that are coming up here. How much of the time would you expect me to do coding versus managing and leading? That's a clarifying question. It just gets it out of your mind and takes away the distraction because it's resolved. And if there's nothing to clarify, let's go on to the next question. You don't have to force it in order to get the point across, okay? Next question, this is where it starts to get more serious, and this one's a throwaway question that sets up the one that follows. Let's say you hire me and I come on board. What would your expectations of me be for the first 30, 60, 90 days? Now, notice that little hesitation I do, 30, 60, 90 days. Phrase it that way because it makes it sound more casual. The other thing it does is they know how to answer that question. They know how to do that one without a problem. And they'll talk with you about getting situated, meeting the people you'll be working with, reporting to, get you acclimated to the environment, a whole bunch of nonsense, but they feel good, right? You've done this with others. You know what I'm talking about. You've hired people, and it feels good to be able to answer a question easily. The next one starts taking it a little bit deeper. So let's say you hire me and it's a year from now. And it's time to give me my first review. And you are thrilled with the decision you made to hire me. What will I have accomplished during that year that would make you think that way? Now, some of you may think to yourself, well, I already asked the question, well, what will success look like? That's a question they know how to answer. That's part of the playbook that managers receive. But when you phrase it in my way, it takes them off the script, which is a lot of what I try to do. Script. Get them off it. Get them talking. Don't let them feel prepared. And this is not an uncomfortable question, but people report back to me and go, that's a great question, which lets you know they haven't really thought about what your success is going to look like. They're going to wind up, they're going to wind up making it up on the fly, which isn't a terrible thing. It gives you information. Now, Frank has asked, do I recommend weaving questions in during the interview? And the answer is, it depends. It depends upon how it relates to their question. So, for example, if they're asking something about your background and you're talking about it and following up by saying, and how do you do it here? That makes sense. If it's something unrelated because you're curious, contain it. Wait till later or wait till the next interview and pose it then. There's always a way to find out, but I want to make sure that there's a flow. And hopefully, Frank, that answers your question.
Oh, Jeff, Barbara also has a question.
Oh, I missed Barbara's question.
That's okay. It's 2 or 3 above comments above Frank. And it's is it to me? Maybe it's just to me. How to address? Okay, good.
How to address re-entering a field that I've not worked in for 20 years, but I've been a volunteer in that field for that period of time. Should I say you have to take a chance on me and tell them what are my strengths? Great question, Barbara. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed it going through the first time. And to me, it depends on how you got the interview. If you were referred by someone, if this is an organization you're responding that has been you've been volunteering for, you don't need to say a lot of that stuff. If this is an emailed a resume in or I applied and it's completely cold, again, back to the theater of interviewing, I want you to think in terms of how you connect with them and how you say it that conveys sincerity. And along the way, I'm going to try and demonstrate how I'd want you to talk with them about it. At some point in the interview, you would say, and you drop your voice ever so slightly, and you slow your speech down ever so slightly, because we associate that with sincerity. Notice that longer pause I use there. I know I haven't worked in this field for a long time. You don't have to tell them it's 20 years. I haven't worked in this field for a long time, but I've done volunteering in this field during that time. I want to make sure you understand how important this is for me to re-enter, especially with an organization like yours. And then you start giving them the sincerity close, talking from your heart with them. You don't have to say, take a chance. They already know that. But make them feel you, feel your heart talking about why you want to do this job. And notice how when I slow down and I look directly at you, how you believe in what I'm saying that much more, even though I'm making it up on the fly here. So Barbara, I hope that was helpful to you. Before I continue on, any other questions? Just making sure.
Tom has a question. Do you have a podcast on this? I'd like to review this as I get closer to an interview. And then, of course, we are recording this, so this will be available as well. But you have 1,900 podcasts. You probably talk about interviewing at least once.
I did a year on interviewing. I did a year on salary negotiation. I think you'd enjoy it more on my YouTube channel, where I was speaking with a meetup in Austin, Texas. And look for one called the Ultimate Job Interview Framework. I think that would be the one that you would look for. There's probably a similar title. Look for something with the word framework. I'm going to have a book out probably in the next 60 days at latest on the idea of interviewing that's going to go into more depth. But it's not completely titled yet. It's almost done. So that becomes another option. And again, the Ultimate Job Interview Framework would be what you're looking for. And I would also say, like David points out, you'll have this as in video form. You don't have to go hunting. Just wait till tomorrow, right? It'll be available tomorrow in the group, or where will it be available?
Well, it'll be on our YouTube channel. And in a moment, I'll put a link to our YouTube channel and your YouTube channel in the chat.
Fabulous. So 2 more questions at the end of the interview. The first one is about managing your expectations. So far I've talked about a clarifying question, asking what their expectations of you would be for the first 30, 60, 90 days, and then after a year, when it's time to review you, what would make them think that you were a great hire? Now, some of you have the habit of saying, so what would success look like after a year? Again, not good. They know how to make up an answer to that. I'm asking the same question in a few sentences because it takes them off their scripted answer. So, two last questions. Question number 4. Let me just make sure I take a deep breath there for a second. When might I expect to hear about next steps in the process? Now, there's a decision tree of options that they can give you that gives you information. One option is, well, I've got about 26, 27 more people to talk to, and I'll be back in touch with you sometime when a meteor hits the Earth. That's one type of answer. Obviously, they're shopping at that point, and don't hold out hope you're one of 28. Another type of answer is, I expect you'll hear early part of next week. Okay, that's a little bit better. Non-committal, but you'll hear early part of next week. Another one is, I'm going to get in touch with HR. I expect I'll be in touch with you early part of next week to schedule you back for another round of interviews. At that time, you'll be meeting with, and you get my point there. That one is much more serious because you feel the energy, they're giving you a lot of details, and then you can follow up by saying, again, early part of next week is what they've said. So if I haven't heard from anyone by Wednesday, Thursday, okay if I follow up? Again, two options. Sure, no problem, or wait. There's a message in that, wait. Slow it down, take their advice. But again, there's options for the answers here for what you can do. Last question, and this is a favorite of mine because it's almost like what was nicknamed in the therapy business a doorknob question. I'm an MSW. I was supposed to be a therapist in private practice by now, but I met my wife in graduate school, and we decided to get married, buy the house, have a child, all that sort of stuff. He turns 20 in February, which is amazing to me, but you know, I put that on hold, and by the time I decided to segue out of recruiting, decided to build a practice as a therapist wasn't for me. So I decided to do coaching instead, but I still bring in some things, as you may notice, from the emotional perspective in the course of this framework. The final question I want you to ask is there anything that you've heard or not heard that gives you reason to question whether I could do this role for you? The key part of that is or not heard. And I say that because, as you know, sometimes people don't ask questions correctly, or they're immature interviewers, and they just say stuff. They haven't really planned it out, or they were busy before, and they make a mistake. Notice that's the benefit of the doubt I'm offering them. So sometimes people report back to me that what happens is, I didn't really hear a lot about such and such. And then they can respond by saying, oh, when you asked that question about whatever it was, you wanted me to talk about this, and I spoke about that. Okay, if I tell you about my experiences with whatever this area is? And in two instances that occurred in 1 week, one guy got hired, one guy was invited back for 2 more interviews before not getting hired. But the door stayed open because they were able to resolve the issue for the hiring manager that they didn't hear about because of the lack of skill or the mistake that the interviewer made at the time. So my questions are designed to give you information so that this way you can also be clear about what their expectations of you will be once you come on board. Get a sense of timeline for next steps, as well as one last shot to see if there's anything that's holding them back from wanting to commit to bringing you back, to take one last shot. I'll just simply say that that question about expectations over the first year. There was someone I used to, when I did recruiting, he was a client of mine. What this person did was take a position with another firm, and he called me up in tears because he really wasn't sure what he was stepping into. And he wound up in a situation where 80% of the money for the program he was responsible for had been spent by his predecessor, but only 20% of the work had been done. He didn't know what he was stepping into, and he realized, I'm the fall guy for this failure. I just want to make sure you know what's going to be happening for you here when you join this organization or decide not to, so that this way you're clear. There are no surprises or fewer surprises. There's always some surprise when you're on board, right? So, David, how much time would you say I still have? I want to make sure I cover some other things as well.
Yeah, we can go for another 20 minutes or so. No problem.
Fabulous.
Yeah. I'll start doing this, shaking my hands, and that'll be, time to
How about some
wrap
hula
up.
moves?
There you go. Yeah, okay. With the shirt.
Perfect. So in the 15 minutes before an interview, it's one of my favorite topics. What do you talk about and what do you do in advance of the interview? And there are obviously 3 interview types that can happen: phone, video, in person. More and more people are reporting to me in-person interviews are happening prior to hire, and we have to be prepared for that. So in the 15 minutes before a phone interview or a video interview, let's do video first. If you've got a laptop or some stationary device that you're working with, you've seen the job description, right? And you have the stories prepped out. If you've got a few sticky pads, a sticky pad, take a few of the notes and use the frame of your laptop as talking points, as reminders for the stories that you want to tell, and any other points. If you struggle to remember that opening question, write it out there. After all, I'm going to use my own. I have an external camera, but I'm going to treat it as though it were internal. See, here's my hand. You don't block the camera, obviously, but if I put it to the right of the camera, you can't see it. Put it to the left of the camera, you can't see it, right? You can read the question if you need to for video interview. Phone interviews, I always tell people wherever you tend to take a phone interview, have some notes out in front of you for the points that you want to cover in advance. Remember, your voice is your sales tool. Your voice is what communicates on a phone interview, whether you're interested, interesting, or not. They don't have how good looking you are, your wardrobe to work with. All they have is your voice. And I know I've been talking for a long period of time, and I've tried to vary my vocal inflections along the way to avoid risk losing you. And so far, 79 of you have stayed on the call. Good for you. And don't be professional. Don't be, and by professional, I tend to think of rigid. Let your personality come out. So often when people do interviews, whether by phone, video, or in person, they go into professional mode. And there's nothing for the hiring manager to attach to as a person. Remember, when they're hiring, they're thinking about fit. I happen not to be a big believer on the concept of evaluating for fit, but most of you who've managed think you can do it, even though there's ample data to demonstrate that you really can't. But I'm not going to go down that road right now. I just recognize that everyone thinks that they can evaluate for fit. And if 15 people come in for interviews who all behave professional, what allows you to stand out from the rest of them? Risk being different. Risk giving them some personality along the way so they have something to be drawn to. or repelled by. If they don't like who you are as a person, the way you'd be on your job, why would you want to go to work there? Just be as you would normally be on your interviews. Now, as such, I spoke about in the 15 minutes before, if you have a laptop, using the frame of the laptop to have some points set aside for yourself. Because if you do it, for example, on the frame of your laptop, and you look to the left to read a little bit or look to the right to read a little bit, they really can't tell the difference, right? Also, be aware of glare on video interviews as well as in person for those of us who wear glasses. So, for example, I'm on camera throughout most of this, and I've generally been trying to tilt my head forward ever so slightly, not particularly discernible, but when I'm like this, there's more glare than when I'm like this. So just be aware of glare on your glasses because it keeps people from seeing your eyes, and they want to see your eyes as much as possible. Also, smile on your face, particularly at the beginning of the interview when you're connecting. And when you're saying, hey, thanks so much for making the time to reach out to me, have the smile on your face. Let them feel happy from you as you talk. Phone interview. You're seated in a comfortable place with notes. Have your resume out in front of you as well. This way, when they're telling you about the job, you can circle some things that you want to make sure you can hit on in your answer. It becomes a way that you have reminders prepared for yourself, so that in this way, you hit all the talking points. And lastly, for the in-person interview, when you get to that point, we're coming up on winter. It's going to get cold, right? You may drive somewhere, you may take the train somewhere. When you meet with someone, I just want you to get to the building a couple of minutes early so that in this way, you can get your hands warmed. You can get your body warmed so that what you're able to do is feel physically comfortable. In summer, I would tell you get there early so that you have a chance to cool off. No one, and eventually we'll get to the point where we can shake hands. No one likes to shake hands with sweaty palms or a popsicle. So I just want to make sure that when you're there, you feel physically comfortable. And these days, if you're doing something in person, I want you to confirm for them, I'm going to be wearing a mask when I come. I don't want you to be surprised by that. And they'll tell you what their policy has been about that and how they're going to set up the contours of the room to make sure everyone's safe. I've had people say, oh, we don't believe in that kind of stuff. Okay. So I'm seeing someone else on camera. Douglas, is there something in particular you want me to cover, or is that just assigning?
There's also another question from Grant.
Oh,
and
good.
It's, when should you follow up the interviewer if you do not get back to you? If you do not get back to you, so if they do not get back to you within the time frame they gave you to reply?
Well, if you followed what I said earlier, I believe it's a question you should ask at the interview. Now, I'll cover how to do that if you haven't asked my question. My theory is, let's say it's a Friday interview, and you say, so when might I hear from you about next steps? And they tell you Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. I haven't heard from you by Friday. Okay, if I follow up? In a situation where you haven't asked, I believe you wait until the following week to follow up, but you've missed an opportunity. Because part of this is about who has the power. When you think of interviews, there's a power differential that exists. They have the information and the knowledge, and you don't, which immediately puts them in an elevated position. And thus, when you don't know when to follow up, you're back to the lower status role. You'll notice everything I'm talking with you about is designed to be conversational. Everything is conversational in this interview framework. And for Douglas, is there anything that he wanted to make sure about that final question I posed? Is there anything that you've heard or not heard that gives you reason to hesitate as to whether or not I'm qualified for this role? And sometimes they'll lie to you. because they do. We've all been in that situation where it was too uncomfortable to say something at the moment. So give them a chance to at least give you a direct answer, okay? And
There's also a question from Doreen. If you scroll up a little earlier, but I'll read it. I'm interviewing for full-time 1-year role, possibility permanent. Does this seem okay to ask? So if you hire me and it's the end of 1 year, what would it take to make the role permanent?
So I would phrase it ever slightly differently. I would phrase it as along the lines of, so I understand this is a contract to hire. What's going to be used to decide whether or not to bring me on board? Now, you and I both know that part of this is going to be budget. It's not necessarily about you. One of the things that's outside of your control is whether the contract that the consulting firm has with this firm has a conversion cost associated with it, where the client has to pay a fee, and they ask themselves the question, why do we have to spend $40,000 to hire her? We've had her here for a year. We can hire someone else for a lower fee than that. So on your side, one of the things you want to check out is on the contract you have with the client, do you have a conversion fee associated with it, or is it a straight direct hire? So this way, you know what roadblocks exist for you joining. And then you can ask the company that's interviewing you, when you're evaluating whether or not to bring someone on full time, who's been a consultant for you for a year, or sometimes it's less, they try and do the conversion when they're really happy. What goes into the decision to bring someone on board full time? And they may say, we're spending too much money with the consulting firm, we'll just as soon bring you on board. Whatever it is. But notice, it's not just simply with the end client that the issue exists. It exists with the consulting agency that you're working through. So Tom had the question about, do I have a podcast I reference? I've already answered that one.
Yeah, we answered that.
Great. Anything I missed?
I don't think so. I scrolled up and down quickly. I didn't see it. If I missed your question, folks, I'm terribly sorry. Just re-ask it and we'll get right to it.
And then in terms of follow-up, because I didn't quite complete that answer for the questioner, the idea becomes, if you don't know the answer to the question about when you might expect to hear back from them, recognize that they may say, someone came in last minute, so I need a few more days, or I need another week or two. There's information there, because the information is what you did wasn't enough for them to fall in love. And thus, they're still looking for someone better. And remember, you're always competing not just simply with the other people that they're interviewing with, you're competing with the notion that there's someone else out there better that they could talk to. So it's especially at a time when there are so many people are out of work. This notion floats around in many organizations' thoughts. The ageism question. I've been waiting for that one. Joey, thanks for asking the question. I want to start off by saying I turned 70 this year. So I'm clearly in the market as an ageism target. But I think ageism is something that too many people cop to too quickly. And I say that because when I did search and I talked to people, they kept telling me about ageism, and then I would interview them, and they just didn't interview well. So the question comes down to is it real or isn't it? Ageism is real, absolutely. But you have to do your part of the preparation in order to ensure that you deliver effectively. And sometimes you're going to get beaten out. Is that ageism? Sometimes. Often it isn't. Someone did a better job of making them, and this is the magic for interviewing, trust them. When firms hire, competence is only one thing that they look for. Self-confidence, character, chemistry, maybe a little bit of charisma, because charismatic people always do better than non-charismatics. It's not a requirement, but it's true. Charismatic people always do better. All of these factors add up to we trust him, we trust her to do this job. They're going to be low maintenance. I don't have to worry about them. I don't have to worry about her. And that's what you're going for, the feeling that they can trust you. Often when older professionals walk into interviews, they see someone 10 years their junior there, and the first thing that they do is the mental eye roll. I'm dead in the water here. You've given up at that moment. Focus on winning. Focus on delivering your lines effectively. And thus, you will perform better and be more likely to stand out. Now, in some organizations, they'll have the courage to ask you, how do you feel about reporting to someone 10 years younger? Now, most won't do that any longer. Most will just do it in the course of evaluating you. And one of the secrets to doing this is to be proactive in how you address it and offer it up in the course of one of your stories. And I was working for someone, probably 15 years my junior, and terrific guy, and had a great handle on everything that was needed. And thus, had no need for me whatsoever. But he always knew that if he had a question, they could come to me, and I wasn't attached to the decision that he made. So I'm available as a resource, but I'm not going to push my ideas because they're the ones who have the authority, and that's what they were hired to do. I'm there to serve them. So again, a couple of ideas around how to deal with ageism, but the biggest thing is don't go to that right away. Focus on yourself and your own performance first before focusing on being distracted by ageism. Yes, an attitude problem. Yes, Mike. It's how we lessen ourselves so often, because institutionally we are told that ageism exists. There are organizations that are built around the notion that we need protection from ageism. I have no worries about whatsoever. I'm very happy that those organizations exist, but they're not going to be there with you on the interview. They're there for the lawsuit, and it's hard to win the lawsuit because they're going to pull out a mountain of data to demonstrate that you weren't qualified and the person that they chose was. You can't win. So rather than focusing on, oh, woe is me, focus in on what you can do to perform at an elite level on the interview. Catch that one. Focus in on performing at an elite level on your interview so that they can't find a reason to say no to you. And part of that is your acting performance, your energy during the course of the interview that makes all the difference in the world. Any more questions?
Yes, there's one from Joe.
Can a right to hire contractually obligate you to accept at the end of the period, or contractually obligate you to stay in the job for a period of time? Read the contract you're signing. That will tell you everything that you need to know. Most of the time, the contracts are written in such a way no one is covered against the other. But again, you have to read the agreement in order to know with certainty whether or not you are bound. To me personally, I would never sign a contract that would commit me to the end, because I've heard too many instances of, number one, you get to the end and you got nothing else. And now you're out of work for a period of time. Number two is you're emotionally or professionally abused and you have no way of getting out of it. Why put yourself in that position? So, Carol, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. So I'll just simply say, interviewing isn't that hard. Most of the failure on interviews isn't about your knowledge, because, well, most of you know how to do what you do. Some interviews occur and it's a mismatch. They made a mistake in reviewing the resume as to what you could do. But the thing I'll say is the skills needed to find a job are different and complement those needed to do a job. You can do what you do well. I have no doubt about that. The idea is getting that across as a performer to the audience that's going to be there for you, who's there to evaluate and assess you. And as such, that's a part that you can rehearse and practice and have little cheat sheets in order to help with your delivery. So practice, practice, practice. It makes a world of difference. And so you get the job should you continue to interview. And then I'm going to come back to Karen's question. So Gentleman John, you know the right answer to that question. If you have a doubt about whether this is the right thing for you, certainly in these times, I'm never going to tell you to take a decline an offer. If you've been out for any length of time, you need to pay your bills. And as I coached someone recently, take the freaking job and just keep looking. You know, under certain circumstances, I wouldn't encourage that, but you've got to do what's right for you and your family. You're the chairman of the board of your own organization, and you have to do the right thing to protect everyone in the corporation. In my case, the organization is the Altman organization. I have to do what's right for myself and my family. You have your own firm. And then from there, do what you think is right for your board, okay? And then coming to Karen, effective panel interviewing. One of my favorite subjects. So if you've ever watched a talk show and there are 4 people in front of the guest, that's the way a panel interview is set up. And thus, when you come into the room, they may be standing or seated, and as you lower your butt into the chair, that's when you ask my opening question, the person who might appear to be in control. You know that they're the one in control because they're the ones who are inviting you to take a seat in a particular place. And thus you ask my opening question, and as you answer questions, I want you to do the talk show circuit thing, which is you start by answering the question of the interviewer, the person who posed the question, and then you go to this one, and work your way back to center and go to the person on the side, and then always finish up answering the question with the person who posed it. Again, energy all the way through. Make eye contact. If there's a person off to an extreme side of you, don't hesitate to just do a quick look over and acknowledge them, but don't spend much time with them because it takes you away from all the others. Often that person is there to observe body language and be aware of what you do that's incongruent with the words that you're saying that they might want to come back and review at a later date. So think in terms of the talk show approach to interviewing and apply it here.
There is also another question actually came to me. I guess you didn't see it. It's from Frank. What is the best way to handle a situation in which you have had a good interview and you're invited to the next step, but you realize this is not a good fit for you or you no longer want to pursue the opportunity? How and when do you communicate to the company? Is it by phone or email? The goal, of course, is not to burn any bridges.
Right. So the first thing, and again, this could be my headhunter showing up and not wanting to lose the fee. So I want to preface everything with that. I would go to one more round to confirm, because sometimes you hear different things at the next round. So again, the goal is not to argue your way into the job, it's to confirm the evaluation you had at the first meeting was accurate. Assuming it is, I'd wait a day or two to give the impression of having thought about it and then send a message back. Thanks for reaching out to me about this job. It was terrific, but I have some other options I'm thinking more highly of. If I can think of someone else I can refer to you, I'd be happy to do it, but I'm going to gracefully bow out now. If there's a third-party recruiter, you definitely don't tell them because you're going to get into an argument. So why do that? Just go directly to the client because they're the ones that really matter. And then you can CC the recruiter on that so that in this way, there are no surprises for them. And I'm seeing I was an American Gangster and The Sopranos. Any advice to pass the interview audition for TV? Not my expertise. There's so many variables that go into that. And I have friends of mine who are in theater and on TV. It's not my strength. I don't want to mislead you. Anything else?
That's all I see in the Q&A. I mean, if you're wrapping up in a moment, I'll put your slide up and we'll allow a few more minutes for Q&A. You know, it's up to you.
Let's wrap it up.
Okay. So good. So I will put your slide up, and so I'll do it as I will share my screen with the slide.
Jeff,
So,
could I ask one final question?
Of course.
I'm wondering what you think about answering a question with a question.
It depends on what it is.
So
give me an
let's start
example
with
of one give me an example of one that you have a concern about.
you know, the classic, tell me about yourself.
I prefer my way by far. Because remember, they've giving you the keys to the car when they define the role.
Yeah.
So I want to tell them that I can do the role. To me, that's a far
Okay.
better approach. And I'm sorry the slide came out so small. I'll just simply say, what's there is my web address, my LinkedIn profile, my YouTube channel with a direct URL to the channel. The channel is organized by playlists. So if you're looking for interview advice, you can click that. If you want answers to tough interview questions or networking or negotiation or my opinions about different elements of resumes, it's there in a playlist. There's Q&A that I've taken from people over the course of many years that's also there. My podcast is listed there, No BS Job Search Advice Radio, which is #1 in Apple Podcasts for job search. It'll be episode 2000 in November and the 10th anniversary of the show at that time. It started off as a once a week 15-minute rant, and now it's a 7-day-a-week show. Generally short episodes, but I've been doing interviews with people recently, so one may be a longer form interview. Then if you have Q&A after I jump off the line, there's an option. I give two options here. One is if you just want to get a video back from me, which will not wind up on YouTube. I want to make sure you know that. BigGameHunter.us/video answer. And then if you want to schedule 15 minutes with me, the BigGameHunter.us/live. Obviously, at my website, you can schedule coaching with me, for which I'll obviously charge. Schedule a free discovery call, which I'm not going to answer questions on. It's a get acquainted call where you get a chance to evaluate me some more, and I get a chance to see whether I can help you. Lastly, and I don't have this on the slide because I'm not trying to get you to spend a lot of money on me. There's my Amazon channel. Download the Job Search TV app. That's also available for Roku. And then BingeNetworks.tv covers Apple TV and 90 other smart sets. You know, if you have a TV that uses apps, that's where it's available.
Jeff, have you heard anything about Amazon as a place to work?
It's a tough environment. It's a demanding environment. All you have to do is look at the principles.
Yep.
It's, you know, they are an exacting organization, and they're entitled to be an exacting organization. Those principles demonstrate their commitment to their version of excellence. So whether you're someone who works in a factory, someone who works in marketing, someone who works in technology, they have high expectations, and there's no BS about that.
Great. And we do have a few more questions in chat. Tatiana is asking how to address a change of fields. And then she followed up, I mean, if you have experience in one field, but now it is moving to a new field.
So I always think in terms of what's transferable. Now, a lot of this is going to be resolved because hopefully you've been introduced by someone for the interview, so that they know you're not in their current field. And thus what you're able to do is, so many people waste time going in through the front door, which is the applicant tracking system, rather than using the back door or the side door. when you use the front door, the applicant tracking system, it's called the black hole for a reason. So let's not kid ourselves. Why would you do that? So, when you have transferable skills, hopefully someone's introduced you, so they've already paved the way for you. And in the course of your answer, you can talk about the things that you've done that relate to what they care about. And that's so important on your interviews, as I tried to illustrate throughout. Was there a follow-up on that as well? Because I'm, again, scrolling away.
She had the follow-up. I asked that one already. Ronnie has a question. Ronnie, if you realize right away that an interviewer did not love your reply to a question, how do you correct that?
A couple of different ways. Now, sometimes you don't realize that until you're home. But let me deal with the one while you're in the room. And that is, they're asking you something a little bit later on, and your mind is just locked in on that mistake you made. And I want you to pause and lower your voice for a little bit and go, I've got to go back and revisit something that I said earlier. You asked me about such and such. It wasn't quite the right answer. Can I give you a richer perspective on it now? And they'll say, nah, I'm already past that. Okay, it's too late. Most of the time they'll be accommodating. So ask for the opportunity to circle back to the question and get it off your chest so it's solved.
Jeff, Alex Friend, I see has just left, but he's done a presentation where he says, in this business about asking questions, don't make them too pointed, because what your real objective is to get the offer. After the offer, you can ask them about, whatever you might view as more pointed than the others. Any thoughts about that?
It depends on what we're asking about. If we're asking about the job, pointed questions become complicated. If you notice, my questions are pretty simple. One is to clarify something that is troubling you about an incongruence between what they told you and the nature of their interview. Number two and three are about their expectations of when you come on board. Number four is about next steps. And number five is to clarify, whether or not they have any reservations about you. I'm not really talking about things that bother me about the job during the interview, because I'm just drawing them out. There's a point where naturally you're not going to consider this job. So let's move further, and thus what you're able to do along the way is you can always send an email to the recruiter that's representing you, to the HR person afterwards. So you're not doing it in the room where it is confrontational. And thus you can send a quick note saying, I'm curious about something. Notice the word curious. And it's a less confrontational word that's designed to, for those of you who remember the TV series Columbo, you want to be Columbo here without the, the nasal voice and the raincoat. I'm curious about something. And one more thing. By the way, it's on the Sundance channel. If you have that available to you, you can watch that and the old Perry Mason. But just keep asking questions. And Julie wants to have my fifth question one more time. Is there anything that you've heard or not heard that gives you reason to hesitate as to whether or not I'm qualified to do this job? Nancy, thank you, Nancy. And I like the approach, thank you. Ooh, there's an ouch in there. What's the ouch?
Oh, well, I had commented that ATS means applicant trashing system. So, yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, no
Jeff, one
question.
final question.
Sure.
We frequently will hear from, in your headhunter role, someone like yourself in your headhunter role that they've got a job at, I'm using UPS as an example. Oops. Turns out I got a brother-in-law and 4 other people I know at UPS. What do I say to you? How can I deal with you in a fairly straightforward way?
Well, So just to make sure I understand the question, notice I'm asking a clarifying question.
Yes.
Recruiter contacts me about UPS.
Yes.
I know 4 people at UPS. How am I forthright in this situation? So first of all, I have to ask the question, why haven't you contacted them yet?
Okay.
So that's the first thing. Why are you not using your network to maximum potential? Why are you being lazy and passive and sitting back waiting for the phone to ring like magic? It doesn't work that way, especially at a time where 50 million jobs have disappeared and so many of them are never coming back.
Right.
And that's before we get to the stuff that the World Economic Forum has been putting out about how in the US we're amongst the worst prepared economies for the next phase of economic development, because there is a phase that follows the web. So recognize that you have to be smart, especially for those of us who are later on in career, for how you use your relationships.
Yep.
If you are lazy and passive, I frankly pause for a second and go, please present me. And is it okay if I contact a friend of mine or my sister, whomever, after you tell me the resume's in?
Right.
And get a little bit of a push for your resume in that way.
Right.
So that's the way I would take it. But I go back to you. Why haven't you used the contact up until this point? You of all people, John.
Oh, I could be working. Hey, wait a minute. You call me up. We know one another since the flood. I got this thing at UPS. It sounds like you. You're interested.
And even if you are working,
Yep.
the person who gets ahead isn't always the smartest. They
Right.
don't always work the hardest, although those are great qualities to have. People get ahead by being alert to opportunity. Sometimes they're internal to an organization, most of the time they're external. And thus, if you're working right now, you tell the headhunter, I've got something, but I'm open to hearing what you have to say. After all, what kind of job security do we think there is right now?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I was warning about an economic decline for 2 years. Now, obviously, I didn't know about this, but the law of probability said there was going to be a slowdown at some point, and I kept telling people, put your network in place now. Put your network in place now. Most of the people on this call made the mistake of not doing the 2008, learning the lessons of having the network in place from 2008, 2009.
Yes.
And thus your network went fallow, and now suddenly everyone is jumping to reactivate a network that's gone fallow. You have relationships, use your relationships all the time. But if a recruiter's contacted you, they deserve to earn a fee. They've got kids and sneakers and homes that they've got to buy. Let them make a living and support their effort by using your back channel, since you made the mistake of not using your contact.
Another side to it is simply some of these recruiters really do have relationships in their client companies, and those can help you a lot.
Yeah. But remember, sometimes those relationships can goose the number up come offer time without you having to do a lot of the work. Now, sometimes it can goose it down because they're in a position where they're seeing the dollar signs come offer time. So they're going to press you to take the lower number. And there's ways to counter that too. But we don't have time for that today.
Yeah, so Jeff, thank you so much.
Yes.
We'll wrap up the meeting, and in just a couple of minutes, what I will do is reopen or keep the group open for open discussion. But I really like these effective questions that you offered us, because they can really help differentiate any one of us from the competition. And the competition, of course, are the other 4 or 5 people being interviewed for that same position. So it was great to have this fresh insight and ideas on new ways of asking some questions. So thank you so much, Jeff.
You're very welcome. And hopefully, folks, I've been able to serve you well. And I hope you can watch the video again, and take down notes and put it into practice, because it's not enough to let it go in one ear and out the other. You got to watch this a few times and practice it so it becomes second nature.
And what's nice is with the video, you can skip ahead to the question or questions that you specifically want to review. You don't have to watch the whole video. You're welcome to watch as much as you want and need. I will post the video probably by tomorrow, if not today. I have to wait for some technical stuff to get done. I will also be posting the chat, that whole chat log that we've had this morning, so that'll be available. When I post, it's always on the PSG of Mercer County website. On the right side is a sidebar of every page, up and down, and kind of in the middle is a link called Meeting Presentation Documents. This is a meeting, and that's where the presentation documents go. And so you'll see right now the top link will be Jeff's. His one slide, his contact information is there now. Later today, the chat will be there and the video will be there shortly as well. The video will also be on our YouTube channel and actually on our website in that place I spoke, Meeting Presentation Documents. Will just be the link to the exact video on the YouTube channel, but you can always look on our YouTube channel. If you want to know how to get to our YouTube channel, in that same right sidebar on our website is a link. It's an icon for YouTube. And if you click on the icon, it'll take you right to our YouTube channel. So that will be there. What's coming up also next week? We will be right back here next week, virtually, of course. Bill LaChance will be here. Bill is a financial planner, but he's not going to be talking about wealth management topics. He's going to be talking about money-saving strategies during career transition. And that includes health insurance, taxes, paying for college, things like that. So it's really, something very relevant to a lot of job seekers or really anybody. So if you know anyone who is thinking about how to manage their own budget and expenses, invite them next week. All they have to do is click on the link to show up. So that's next week. The following week, career consultant will be here. Her name is Erin Haywood. How to build a compelling online presence. Seems appropriate that we'll be broadcasting that online. So that will be September 25th. And then other groups and meetings in the area. Of course, George Pace has been keeping his weekly webinars on Sunday mornings active. Facebook.com/keeppace. Keep Pace is one word with 2 P's. Facebook.com/keeppace. Tomorrow morning, the Breakfast Club of New Jersey will be meeting virtually. You do need to go to their website, thebreakfastclubnj.com, and then look at the meeting description. It'll be tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. Alex Freund will be presenting virtually. So tell me about yourself. Don't tell me now. That's what he's going to be talking about. So tell me about yourself. It's a question that probably everybody has gotten on an interview. The following week, which is September 19th, will be John Hadley. John Hadley will be talking about interviewing during the COVID era. So you may want to see that. That's careersupportgroup.org. Go to their website. Some of our cousin organizations, PSG of Central New Jersey, they meet Mondays at 10:30. So you can check out their program, psgcnj.biz. They do Mondays at 10:30. And also PSG of Morris County. They meet Wednesdays starting at 9 o'clock in the morning with a weekly program. So a lot that's going on. And then, of course, the oldest continuously running job seeker support group in the state is New Jersey Job Seekers. The group meets virtually on Tuesdays at 7:30 in the evening. I will be placing their next link in our LinkedIn group. So that's what we've got going on in the next couple of weeks. Once again, thanks to Jeff. Glad everyone was able to join, and I hope you got a lot out of it. And until we get to see you, virtual applause, absolutely. And until we get to see you, hopefully next week virtually, have a terrific week, everyone. Bye, everybody.